until you get to Sinai. After all, Cain is long before Sinai. Of course the Bible knows that human beings recognize that murder is bad. But the Bible also knows that they do it anyway. And that without a divine sanction against murder, people will think that it is a humanly invented sanction. And if they will violate it even when it's God's dictate, how much more will it prove to be, and I will come back to this, a fragile rule when it's the rule of human beings. And so at Sinai, what you get is not a series of moral rules that you never could have imagined for yourself. Oh, I thought it was fine to kill before I got here. But the knowledge that it is built into the moral structure of the universe. It's not a personal preference. It's not a societal rule. It is a mandate from God to all human beings. And if you think that mandate doesn't matter, all I can say is you haven't paid much attention to the 20th century. You know, in Karamazov, Ivan Karamazov in Dostoevsky's novel says famously, without God, everything is possible. Except that Dostoevsky feared that eventuality. The same conclusion was drawn by Nietzsche in Germany, but Nietzsche celebrated that eventuality as he had his madman run through the streets and say that we have killed God. Both of these prophets knew that we were coming to a time when a consciousness of God would not filter through Western society. And they recognized that things would be different. And in fact, Dostoevsky in Russia, leading to communism, Nietzsche in Germany, leading to Nazism, were exactly right. It's not that religious people always behave well. It's that the voice of Sinai makes a difference to individuals and to societies, and to suggest that it was a voice that taught us as opposed to reinforced is to make a mistake. And to assume that all you need, I am quoting now, all one needs to know is human solidarity seems to me to fly in the face of everything we know about human beings. If you think that people are basically good, then I suggest you visit a playground. What happens when a new child comes onto the playground? Do the other children go, oh, look, a new child. Let us embrace him and share our toys? Of course not. They say, get the new kid. Because there is an innate distrust of the other. And that has to be transcended by some principle that is greater than the group, such as there is one God, and that one God is sovereign over all, and that everybody is a sister and a brother. I mean, look, parents know this. If people weren't of mixed light and darkness, then it would be very easy to raise kids. You'd say, don't share so much. Don't be so good. Don't always behave. But civilizing a human being takes a lot of work. Rogers and Hammerstein got it exactly wrong when they said that hate has to be carefully taught. It's goodness and love that have to be carefully taught. And that's the purpose of the Torah. It's not to tell you things that you don't know. It's to reinforce and give authority and depth and complexity and richness to what you do know, but you don't always do. That's the first point. And then the second point is what God is in the monotheistic traditions. God is not the tyrant of North Korea. First of all, by the way, just as an aside, as I mentioned in the book, it's very interesting that you got North Korea and South Korea. North Korea is an atheistic tyranny that Mr. Hitchens uses to compare to God. South Korea is a flourishing democracy and has a very strong Christian culture. So which one do you want to live in? You want to live in religious South Korea or atheistic North Korea? But that's just an aside. Here's back to the main point. If you think of God on a human analogy, the proper analogy is not a tyrant. It's not Big Brother. Mr. Hitchens wrote a very estimable book on George Orwell, and maybe that persuaded him to think of God in the way that we think of Big Brother. But in fact, think of it differently. Because he says not only does God know what you do, God even knows your thoughts. What could be more frightening than that? Child psychologists tell us that before a child reaches the age of I, that is the ability to say I, they don't know what is internal and what is external. Child cries, the breast appears. They don't realize that an outside agency is responding to them. Their mother, so to speak, is inside them. Does that cause fear? Or is that intimacy and love? Somebody who deeply believes in God does not feel that God's knowing them is tyrannical, is overbearing, is frightening, but rather is embracing and is beautiful. That's what it means to believe in the God of the traditions at their best. Are there contrary teachings? Absolutely. Religion is not univocal. It's been around for thousands of years, and lots of people have said many things, some of them foolish. Just ask Mr. Hitchens. He will give you a fairly startling catalog. But this is, in fact, the idea that human beings are all one, that there is a moral order to the universe, and that we are loved. And that's not a tyranny. That's the sovereignty of God. And that's why I want to close up by telling you that really this debate is based on a misperception. It has to do with what the religious person is. The religious person is not someone who totes up some arguments from column A and some arguments from column B. I taught for many years, and both in New York and in Los Angeles, theology, and I used to teach all the proofs, and I put that in quotation marks for God, the ontological proof, the teleological proof, the cosmological proof. I diagrammed them on the board, I explained them. I never had a student come up to me after class and go, now I believe. Because it is not an intellectual process by which we come to an understanding of God. Rather, it is something deeper. It's an orientation of the soul towards the universe. It's how you see the world. It's how you apprehend its beauty and its richness and its wonder and its love. And if you see it in a detached way, in a disenchanted way, and you say, what I need is proof, the same way that I need proof in a test tube or a laboratory,
Remind me. What are we going to do?
then you will not, in fact, discover what it is that the great traditions of the world mean when they say, Karov Adonai l'kol korav, l'kol asher yikra'uhu ve'emet. God is close to those who call upon God, to those who call upon God in truth. Thank you.
Well done. I overran my time last time, so I'll try and condense and get nearer to our exchange this time. But
it's good to know you have a sense of Jewish time.
well, Jewish time will do. Thomas Jefferson, whose biographer I am in a small way, once said, meditating on slavery in his notes on the state of Virginia, he said, I tremble for my country when I reflect that God is just. Once you've heard that statement, I'm sure many of you have heard or read it before. Once you have, as you'll know, you won't forget it again. You'll always remember that he said that. But when you think about it again, or even at all, you realize it's a nonsensical statement, almost an idiotic one. If there was a just God, what would there be to tremble about? If we were in the hands of a benign deity, a father who always looked out for us and wished for the best, where would be the rest of Jewish history? Where would be the rest of human history? There'd be nothing really to worry about. It would be like scraping your knee in the famous playground. How bad could it be? There's a just God. Now, I don't think anyone here who's studied human society and human history and the human tragedy, whether you define tragedy as the Greeks did, as the fatal flaw in our own design, or whether you define it as Hegel did, as the terrible moment when there's a conflict between two concepts of right, you can't just say, well, thank heavens at least Daddy is still